A sense of place is more than a location. It is something within each of us. It is often a feeling, a sense that tells us we are home to ourselves. Our sense of place may be filled with peace. It may hold chaos. It remains ours. Whether we were born here or found our way here later in life, the question is the same. What brought us to this place?
I moved to northern Minnesota when I was 4 years old.
The summer I was 6, we moved to Little Pine Township. We had a bigger house with an upstairs, still very primitive.
My parents bought land in Outing in the early 40s with the coming out pay that my dad received from the war.
I was 10 years old when we came up north and built the now gone red log cabin on the east narrows of Lake Washburn.
From the time I was born until I was 5 years old, I lived with my grandmother on her farm in Little Pine Township, the place we still call the old place.
My family moved from Gull Lake to the Washburn Lake Ranger Station during World War II when I was 3.5 years old.
My grandpa built a home on Highway 6 where he and my dad started a sawmill. Dad bought some of Grandpa's land and built a home.
I first came to Lake Roosevelt in 1951. My dad, Charlie Eggers, found an ad in the Minneapolis paper about property near Outing, Minnesota.
It was 1959 when my family arrived in Outing. I was 7 years old, and I believed my life was over.
In 1988, my husband and I purchased a lot on Washburn Lake in Outing.
I bought my land on Woods Bay in Outing in 1988. 8 acres, 200 feet of lakeshore, my little slice of heaven, and a real steal.
A place can be like a negative, a visual in our mind. A place can be a sensual garden, holding feelings, memory, smells, voices, sounds.
We were friends with the animals and would lay on the sleeping cows warm in the summer sun.
On that same road was a rickety old shed that Jeanette and I would hide in. It was our secret place.
Walking through a narrow path and hearing the sound of falling leaves, like rainfall. The beauty of a purple thistle, a butterfly or a moth moving on the dried flower stalk.
We would lay and watch the white puffy clouds and the bright blue sky forming creatures.
Green, silky moss on the old tree fall, so lush you'd like to lie down and rest there.
Wolves howled. You could draw the covers up tight at night and feel the delicious terror and chill up your spine.
We would climb the ladder into the haymow and lay in the soft, loose, fragrant new-mown hay, listening to the barn swallows chirping in the rafters, and talk and dream.
A place is not static, but continues to return with glimpses of the past.
Stories told, new and old, from some time ago. Here and now, through fading clouds, they still shine as gold.
As I think back to this place, our home in Little Pine, we're setting out on the front step. We're a quarter mile from Grandma Fletcher's. It was a small, one-room house that originally was a garage. The rooms were separated by blankets and furniture. There was an old outhouse that I didn't mind using until Dad threw a dead bobcat down the hole one winter. I was terrified. That bobcat didn't look dead to me.
I still remember the 10-year-old who wandered, who learned to clear away brush, and the teamwork to put up structures, an outhouse and a cabin. We did funky things outside, roasting hot dogs and eating beans out of a brown B&M jar nestled near warm coals from the brush fire that burned all day.
I was at my Grandpa Kyle's one time during a snowstorm. My uncle put me on his back and buttoned Grandpa's sheepskin coat around us, and together we walked down the river to our house. What kid wouldn't feel secure and loved?
I remember memories, memories remember me. I remember memories.
On one of those nights with my high fever, I experienced a hallucination. My mom was standing by me, making pancakes. I could even smell them. Much to my sorrow, Mom really wasn't there.
There were, of course, darker times. I felt the tension and worry in my grandmother every day when she would turn the radio on to listen to the news. The United States had entered into World War II, and she knew many of the boys that had been deployed. That is the only time the radio was turned on because it ran on a battery and they were hard to come by.
How we arrived comes alive. How the seeds found sunshine. How each one grew and gave life anew and became all we ever knew.
I still remember listening to the radio with our family to hear the happy news that the war was finally over. The onion skin thin letters from our uncle overseas serving in the medical corps would be ending. Ration goods would be coming to an end.
I remember a day my dad took me deep into the woods, off of the familiar rutted road. We walked a long way, or so it seemed to my 10-year-old legs. Suddenly, before us was a huge sprawling tree filled with reddish blueberries. My dad said it was a Juneberry tree. We filled the dish pans with warm, juicy berries. At the Red Log Cabin, he showed me how to bake a pie filled with this luscious fruit. Now I knew taste, and it was home.
I alone was being held close on Pop's lap. with his arm a little tighter around me than usual. The only way I can put this experience into words is to say that I had an indescribable internal sense of belonging.
I remember memories shining gold upon the wind. Memories remember me, how I hear them blow again. I remember memories.
Choosing community in northern Minnesota has been a search for solitude, tranquility, and nature. The love of waters and stress-free living is a compelling force.
Our first fall on the lake, we wore coats, hats, mittens, sipped hot chocolate, curled up in blankets while we cruised Lake Roosevelt. Oh, the real loon sounds brought shivers because we had only heard loons in the movie On Golden Pond. This was music to our ears.
The beach was in a little bay area overlooking a huge lake. The water was so clear you could see the ripples in the sand and tiny minnows swimming around.
When the work was done, we went to the lake. Silky warm waters soothed the bug bites and the brush scratches. Diving into the sandy bottom of the Narrows of Washburn, we found odd driftwood and prize rocks. We were one with nature.
I loved that cabin with a pure joy and spent the better part of summers there, finding my place among the natural world.
We had found the pines and the birches. We were thrilled to watch bald eagles soaring overhead and reminding us of how lucky we were to be living here.
My favorite books were about horses and life in the country, things and places far removed from my city life. The stories I read painted a picture of the perfect, serene life.
One never tires of absolute beauty, the peacefulness and calls of the birds.
I would lay in the dark listening to the sounds, knowing I was protected and safe. The trees were my sentries standing guard, teaching me that fear is never out there, but only in here.
There is no greater instructor for self-awareness, independence, and creativity than unplugging from your everyday life and taking time to be on the water or in the woods.
The transition from city to country can be surprising, astonishing. Going up north is a destination. Becoming part of a community is a commitment.
There were no 4 lanes in those days, so the trip took forever in our minds. The interesting sights began at Mille Lacs Lake, where birch bark crafts were being sold alongside the shoreline by the Ojibwa. In fact, the long drive allowed my parents to decide that the kids and Mom would just live at the lake in the summers. Dad drove back and forth.
I was hoping he was kidding when I first saw the cabin, referred to lovingly by one of the lake dwellers as that hunting shack. We found everyone to be particularly in awe of our lifestyle. No one was crazy about the idea of going to the outhouse.
These cabins had no running water, no indoor bathrooms, and not a lot of comfy furniture. But we didn't care. We loved it. We loved being at the lake, swimming, and fishing.
It did not take us long to realize that the land of 10,000 lakes offered a lot of choices. We quickly learned not all cabins would fit into our budget. We drove north so far we thought we were in Canada. We traveled around the Alexandra and St. Cloud areas. Too farmy. Where were the pine trees and the birches? Where was that North Woods atmosphere so vivid in our minds?
They had decided to buy this old resort on beautiful Lake Roosevelt. We now had a beach of our own. I couldn't believe it.
The next 12 years were spent clearing a space on 7 acres to build the house. The bones, roof, and siding went on in the spring of 2003. In May 2014, I retired and we moved to the woods.
I was desolate each fall when I had to close down and leave for the winter. I absolutely knew I had to find a way to live here permanently. I also knew that if I was going to live my dream of an artist's life, I would need to be mortgage-free, and therefore would have to build the year-round house myself. I didn't grasp at the time I wasn't just moving to the woods. I was about to become part of a community.
We knew the neighbors as our second families. My second mother taught me how to knit, cross-stitch, and crochet, and have been a lifelong needle person because of the hours we sat visiting at each other's homes along our lakeshore.
I knew everyone in town, and it truly was a village raising all the youth. If I did anything, my parents knew. There was a very effective communication among all the parents and neighbors. No security cameras were needed, just a loving, connected community working in cooperation. We were a family.
I had only lived in Emily for a year. I had moved from a small town much like Emily, where everyone seemed to be related. Now I was no longer related to anyone. I felt alone and afraid of doing the wrong things and not being accepted in the community.
What keeps me in this place is the beauty. The people. You cannot exist with beauty alone. You need people.
Building a business and working up north is a challenge. It requires perseverance, summer sunshine, and winter snows.
My dad was an electrician by trade. In those early years, he commuted from the Twin Cities to Outing. My mom would run the tavern from early in the morning until well after midnight. Then she would go into the kitchen to fry burgers for the late-night patrons and send them home. After that, she would clean and mop up in order to start again early the next morning. She did all of this while she was raising me and my 2 older sisters. This hard pace threatened my mom's health, and they had to sell.
Our family life revolved around our dad's work. When he was gone in the truck on one of his forestry projects, our mother would fill in answering the phone and giving out information to visitors who stopped by. Summer days were especially busy, and we had to stay close to the station because of fire danger. Our cousins and relatives could look for us to visit only on days it rained.
Outing was a collection of homes and businesses around Lusher's Bay. My parents bought the Narrows Trading Post, which had a Gamble's Hardware and a 3-2 beer joint on either side of it. As soon as I could move a case of cans by myself, I was put to work stocking shelves. It was hard work, but I enjoyed being engaged with customers.
Pop was a logger, a farmer. Sometime after moving north, he went to work in a government program started by President Franklin D. Roosevelt. It was hard work with a shovel digging drainage ditches for $50 a month, half of which went to pay for our property.
My mom's friend was an artist. I spent many days as a young person learning art. My dream was to own that shop someday. I was so disappointed when they sold it during my late teens. It is now known as the Owls and Things. That store gave me my first introduction to employment and a paycheck.
I worked on the house 7 days a week, but I also needed cash. I got a job at the Outing DNR Forestry during a fire season as a smoke chaser. That same summer, I also scooped ice cream at Owls and Things, and I worked weekends at the Village Inn when Chet and Ellen owned it. We became like family, close, loving, and slightly dysfunctional. Of course, these jobs turned out to be more than just jobs.
Since ancient times, caring communities have helped build dreams, set goals, or heal a sorrowing heart.
As old as time, the heart provides a shelter for us all, to hear our cries and dry our eyes and catch us when we fall, and offer to another in need of that same cover from the storm.
Our days of deep grieving began. After the funeral, we returned home to Emily, and we were all around the dinner table when Tom said, "What are we going to do? We don't have a grandpa." It broke my heart, and all I could say was, "We'll get one."
All that's lost we'll help to find and help to see it through. We heal and mend, and in the end, your day begins anew.
The next day, I went next door to Frank and Mabel and told them my story. I asked Frankie if he would be our grandpa, and he said yes. Frank and Mabel became grandpa and grandma forever after.
All the world is better for an offer just to try and realize those crying eyes are ours now to dry. Our helping hands to heal them, the gift is in the giving.
I will be forever grateful to Frank and Mabel for what they unknowingly did for Tom and me by easing the pain and caring for us during our time of grieving. Now and then Mabel would get upset with us, but Frank never complained. He was a good grandpa.
It's in all of us to lend a hand to each and every one. All beneath one rising sun.
A woodland is most always a place of discovery. When one walks onto an old forest bed, that step is cushioned by 1,000 years of nature's layered matter. An archaeologist might punch through and make amazing discoveries, like who came through this way.
It's fascinating to learn how many years our Lake Roosevelt area has been treasured. A Hamline University archaeology professor spent 2 weeks for 2 summers with his students holding a field school on our land. They found artifacts that reveal Lake Roosevelt was a paddling passage route to Leech Lake 4,000 years ago. Those artifacts are displayed in the Minnesota State History Center. The journals of Joseph Nicolay detail their journey following known passages as they map this watershed region of the Mississippi.
Over the years, we heard the Teddy Roosevelt stories of his visit here. And like others, we wondered if that's how the lake got its name. We learned the sad reality of the 1969 tornado. We learned how the lakes carried trade into the Mississippi.
It struck me that I was viewing relics of a bygone era on Lake Washburn. The land around the house and the cabins and the sheds were littered with rusting appliances, old motors, a cement mixer, and a laundry mangle.
Writers are archaeologists, digging through life's moments in a quest to remember and serendipitously discover their own Pandora's box.
From the time before I entered school, I had that sense. I had no aptitude or interest in sports or hunting. It was brushed off to a degree by my being left-handed. But my interest in the pages of Harper's Bazaar, rather than Field and Stream, put me in a shadow I could never escape completely.
My mother had wanted to be a school teacher, and with one more year's schooling, she could have taught in one of the little country schools of that time. But her mother's death put an end to that dream. When I was born, she began to plan for me. I always expected to teach someday.
I heard Sophie before I saw her. She rushed at me with a tree limb club and yelled, "Get out of here! Get off my land! Get off my property!" I quickly forgot why I had come and laughed. I knew I shouldn't characterize another person by the events of a single meeting. Still, over the next 20 years, I was curious and searched for understanding.
I do not feel at home visiting the house I built and lived in for 25 years. I've changed, grown into a man, live in a different season of life, and I'm happy for it.
In the end, I came to understand the house will be ash someday, but the love and effort of building a dream with my community will stay with me always.
God has given us such beauty and marvels in our world, and I want to see as much of it as I can. But Emily is where my life started, and it's where I want it to end.
In my adult years, I would search for that tree off of the known rutted trail and never found it. I remember writing a verse. I went in search of the Juneberry tree in the hopes I could find my father and me. When we observe our own communities, we discover we have been shape-shifted by the villages and the people that were part of our lives.
People knew each other and looked out for one another. Snooping might be another way to define the care given me by neighbors. All were friendly, but if someone didn't like you, you never knew it. The 50s and 60s was an era of being polite and nice.
Suddenly there was Frank helping that man getting calmed down and in a safe place. Frank had only one arm, having lost his shoulder and arm to cancer. So I'm sure it was no easy task for him to help the big man stand upright. But there was Frank, who stepped up to help the drunk while I looked on in disgust. What a lesson of tolerance I learned that day.
Between my first meeting with Sophie, my walk through the littered resort, and a few stories that other longtime lake residents told me, I realized this resort was only a book's cover. My search over the years had given me a new, different view of life on the lake.
I moved home every summer to save money. I viewed Outing and its inhabitants in a different way. I still kept my secret, but I had read and seen things. I no longer believed I was the only person who felt the way I did. Outing changed very little on the surface, it seemed, but as the world changed, so did Outing.
I remember taking a piece of candy from Hoffman's store, and as my dad and I were pulling away from the store, in my innocence, I started eating the candy. My dad confronted me as he had not purchased it. I was directed back into the store to confess. I will never forget that experience. It became so real to me, the betrayal and the offense that I had just committed against a member of my family.
In the 59 years since my family arrived in Outing, much has changed, but I still have friends here. Friends who were here 59 years ago. My community remains.
It's amazing to me to look back and see how long I've been in love with this area. I hardly know another way of life.
People are amazed when I tell them I actually built the house myself, but the truth is, it took a whole village to help me build this dream.
Home is where we go. When we're tired, hungry, celebrating, hurting, wanting to be alone, want to find someone to listen, we go home.
I feel at home when I turn into my driveway, sit with Therese on the deck, the screen porch, or my favorite chair overlooking the fireplace, and normally enjoying a glass of wine.
Truthfully, where my heart and mind go today is this home, built on land my dad had always wanted to build on. That makes it special to me.
I suppose after living in an area that I liked and settled into, I never gave much thought to live elsewhere. It was a matter of what home is.
That tree off of the beaten path was home to me. It held the sounds, the smells, the taste of the place I know is home. There's nothing confusing about that. It is the place you know. You are one with the earth and your soul.
Home is where you store your memories. When you were young, you feel home will be there forever, but it won't. Where did the time go?
In retirement, we wonder where time went. Weren't we just parents of young children? Now the young children coming through our door are another generation.
Wonderful memories were created on this lake. Grandchildren learning how to swim, bait a hook or not, nature hikes, family reunions, and more.
This was the environment that shaped many generations of our family. What a joy to enable my grandchildren the same experiences I've been able to treasure for years.
As our family grew up, home was where the family gathered for holidays, weddings, and after funerals. We got together during good and bad times and supported one another.
We sleep in old bedrooms and look through boxes of photos, remembering who lived here. It's a place of healing.
Home to rest, home together, home to heal, home's returning heart, home's returning
Nothing better than holding an old leather album full of people and memories you love. Let me hold it, feel it, and smell it.
When I close my eyes and think of home, I go to where I live now in Emily, deep in the woods, where I see no sunrises and no sunsets.
home to hold. Home is always home to feel. Home remembers. Home remembers.
Each year, as the seasons change and the snow melts into spring, her being will be absorbed through my roots, and we will warm our meshed souls as the sun and moon dance over the water nearby.
I see the golden and red pink hues of a sunset painting the night sky, and I know I've come home to a safe place.
I have I've tried to be a faithful steward and friend to the land, the waters, the wildlife, and especially the people. Individuals of all walks of life who live in the place we call home.
Home to air and land and light, home to all we see, home to when we close our eyes, home our hearts to keep, home with those right by your side. Welcome. Right by your side, welcome home. Welcome
home. Sense of place is more than a location. It is often a feeling, a sense that tells us we are home to ourselves.